House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Tuesday, March 12th, 2024 at 2:35 in the afternoon. So we are going to now switch, have a conversation with the Treasurer's Office on H 769, which is the baby bond bill. So Ashlyn, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate it, especially at short notice. I know I had a conversation with Treasurer Pichak over town meeting week break, and I think he had, probably a pretty good idea on how we could move this forward and keep this conversation going. So welcome.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Ashlyn Doyon. I'm the Director of Policy with the State Treasurer's Office. In recognition of sort of two things, one, the timeline crunch that always occurs this time of year with crossover, and two, a sort of large base budget hole that folks are working to try and fill in the House right now. Our goal is just to keep this conversation moving. And so we have a couple of suggestions as to how to do that. Currently in the bill, Section 608 is sort of the appropriation section. That's the section that directs the treasurer to deposit the $3,200 annually for each child born. We think that it would still be beneficial to move the policy piece of this bill forward this year, even if we needed to take out this section for now. There's so much work and so many fruitful conversations that we've had the opportunity to have with your committee this year around different aspects of the policy that should be studied. The landscape nationally right now is also really ripe for baby bonds legislation. And so if we were to take that section out and instead put in place a component of the study to analyze, funding sources, and just sort of a piece of language that stated that until a funding source was identified, the entitlement to the deposits didn't quite start yet. We think that that could solve the sort of money issue that permeates many policy pieces of legislation, but also would allow us to begin working in a really productive way on furthering this policy in Vermont. So I'm not sure what folks' reactions to that might be, or what the will of the committee might be to sort of move this along before crossover, but we definitely wanted to put that on the table and see if there was an appetite to do something like that.
Okay. Thoughts?
So it would mostly be a report? Is that it's
It would, yes, it would mostly end up being a report, but also many of the parameters of the future program would be articulated in the legislation. And so once a funding source was identified, we would be nearly ready to go.
I think you're talking about the changes that we made in section 1. That's the policy pieces that are there now, and then in section 2, there's been there's a lot of things that we're asking the treasurer to take a look at.
Yes, we could begin work on all of those things.
And include the funding piece as well in there.
Exactly. And I want to make sort of two other points. Since I've last spoken to you all, I've learned of a pilot project happening in Georgia where they're actually giving 15-year-olds $40,000, and they're going to study how that works out for them over the next 5 to 10 years. And so we will have some data to work off of that is sort of like that mature data of the baby bonds program versus just, waiting the 18 years, because in Georgia, they are accelerating that timeline. So that's really exciting that we'll be able to see sort of how that plays out, what choices people make, what are some of the pros and cons or education pieces that are suggested out of that. The other thing I think is that in Vermont, the baby bonds issue and across the country, it's been so bipartisan that there's a beneficial symbolic component to moving this forward this year as other states contemplate it. Even if we're not able to get our arms around the funding quite yet, we'll definitely hope to do that sort of next session, maybe, and come back to you. But it will sort of signal, yes, Vermont thinks this is a good idea too, to other states that are working on this. So it only serves to move forward the sort of transformative impact of a program like this nationwide.
Okay. Stephanie?
So in this, you mentioned the Georgia program, and did you say it was 14 years old?
Sorry, I think I misspoke. 15-year-olds for $40,000 each.
$40,000.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's interesting. I was hoping that in this study that you would then have maybe a brief analysis of all the existing programs that are going on in the country. That are similar to this? Would be similar to this one? So would that be part of something you would do?
I think that would be a prudent part, a prudent piece of information to include in the study. I don't think that you've articulated it specifically in the language, but there are a number of different things that we're looking at in the study where it would behoove us to have sort of that survey of information.
Okay.
Right now, there are not that many programs to go off of, right? This pilot in Georgia is just sort of starting up. Connecticut, of course, went into place, I think like 18 months or a year ago. But there are a lot of states that have legislation this year, so we'll have more to work off of in the coming months.
Thank you. Ashlyn, could you clarify? I might have missed it or misheard. Did you say that no funding source need be identified for the study, or that you're intending to identify a funding source?
We do not need funding for the study work. I think that if we took out the language in section 608, which is the appropriative language, you would want to add a clause under the study component of the bill that directs us to include funding sources in our analysis that we bring back. And also, yeah, exactly. And also just know in the legislation that these deposits won't be taking place until a funding source is identified.
Understood. Thank you.
Well, I think I like the idea, and it's unfortunate that we don't have a funding source at this moment in time. Everyone knows we're crunched for time, so I'm thinking that that's a good way of keeping it alive and well, and taking some time to find some sources for that. So it sounds like the Treasury Department came up with a solution that might work. That's what I think. So I'm supportive of the idea.
There's other comments? Everybody good with going down this road and see what the language looks like? Okay. Right.
Can I make a request that we have a full strike call for the next?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You will want to see that section 1. So Ashlyn, can you work with John? And I'll send an email to John and copy you on it and ask him to work with you and to create a strike all, and hoping he might have time to do that so that maybe we can look at that after the floor tomorrow.
Wonderful. Yes, I will work with him. And I've also got our general counsel sort of standing by in case he needs assistance. So I think we can do that quickly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, that sounds like a good plan.
Mhm.
We'll go from there. We'll try to get the language. So I think that's all we have for today. We'll be looking at 707 tomorrow, hearing from Department of Labor. Seeing where we can go with that. And then, so let's plan for after the floor, we'll try to set up time to look at, well, if we get off the floor in a timely manner, yes, it is tomorrow, depending on what's coming up. We'll look at 769. If not, we'll set up another time sometime this week to get to it. So if there's nothing else, I think we're done for today. Done about as much as we can. Tomorrow will be another day. So I think, just know that we could be going later after the floor this week, depending on how things continue to move forward on 707 and 121. So reserve tomorrow night, possibly Thursday night, and we could go long on Friday as well to get these things out. So so with that, enjoy your freedom for tonight.